The widow stood alone in the Colorado wasteland, staring at 40 letters from men who wanted to own her ranch more than love her. One promised gold. Another swore eternal devotion. All of them were liars. Except one, a scarred mountain trapper who offered nothing but brutal honesty and calloused hands. She should have chosen safety. She should have picked the banker with his clean fingernails and empty promises. Instead, she saddled her horse, loaded her rifle, and rode straight into wolf country to meet the stranger everyone said would destroy her. What happened next? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The smell hit Evelyn Harper before she even opened the door. Rotting meat, unwashed bodies, and the sharp metallic stink of desperation. She pressed her handkerchief against her nose and stepped into the general store where 40 letters waited for her like a deck of marked cards. Mrs. Harper. Marcus Webb, the postmaster, looked up from behind the counter with eyes that said he knew exactly what she was doing and pitied her for it. They're all here. Every last one. She didn't answer, just walked to the counter and stared at the pile of envelopes. Some fancy with wax seals, others plain and water-stained. 40 men. 40 strangers. 40 different versions of the same lie she'd been telling herself for 3 months. That she could save the ranch without selling her soul. Her husband Thomas had been dead since January. Buried under 6 feet of frozen Colorado dirt, while she stood there in a black dress that used to fit before grief hollowed her out. The fever took him in 4 days. 1 minute he was splitting firewood, the next he was burning up in their bed, calling out for his mother who'd been dead 20 years. And now, March 1876, the ranch was bleeding money like a stuck pig. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said quietly. "There are other ways." "Like what?" Evelyn's voice came out sharper than she intended. "Sell to Caleb Mercer for half what the land's worth? Watch him tear down everything Thomas built? I'd rather marry a stranger than give that vulture the satisfaction." Marcus flinched. Good. She was tired of people tiptoeing around her like she was made of glass. She'd spent the last 3 months chopping wood, fixing fences, and shooting coyotes. Her hands were cracked and bleeding, her back ached constantly, and every night she lay awake doing math that never worked out. How many cattle she could sell before there weren't enough left to breed, how long the money would last, whether she should just give up and move back east to live with her sister's family like some helpless widow. The advertisement had been a last resort, a desperate, humiliating last resort. Widow-seeking husband. Colorado ranch. Must be strong, honest, willing to work. No drinkers, no gamblers. Right care of Webb's General Store, Silver Creek. She'd paid for it with money she should have spent on feed. "You gonna read them here?" Marcus asked. "No." She scooped the letters into her canvas bag. "I'll take them home." "Evelyn, don't." She met his eyes. "Just don't." The ride back to the ranch took an hour. The horse, Old Bess, who'd been with them since they first bought the property, knew the way by heart. Which was good, because Evelyn couldn't stop staring at the bag of letters bouncing against her thigh. 40 men wanted to marry her. 40 strangers who'd read 3 lines in a newspaper and decided she was worth the gamble. The thought made her stomach turn. The ranch looked worse every time she saw it. The main fence was sagging. The barn door hung crooked. The house, a simple 2-room structure Thomas had built with his own hands, needed paint and new shingles and about 1,000 other things she couldn't afford. Inside, she lit the lamp and dumped the letters onto the kitchen table. They scattered across the rough wood like leaves. She stood there for a long moment, just staring at them. Then she poured herself a glass of whiskey. Thomas's whiskey, the bottle she'd been saving for some special occasion that would never come, and started reading. The first letter was from a businessman in Denver. "My dearest madam, I was most moved by your advertisement. As a successful merchant with considerable holdings, I would be honored to offer you security and comfort. My home is spacious and well appointed. You would want for nothing. I have enclosed a photograph so that you might see I am a man of refinement and good breeding." She looked at the photograph. He was soft, plump, clean. Everything about him screamed city and easy life and man who's never had dirt under his fingernails. She tossed it aside. The second was from a rancher south of Denver. "Ma'am, I got 2,000 head of cattle and the best grazing land in the territory. I need a woman who can cook and keep house while I run the operation. No romance, just partnership. I'm a practical man looking for a practical arrangement. Better. At least he was honest about what he wanted. But something about the way he wrote, I need a woman who can cook, made her jaw clench, like she was another piece of equipment to maintain his ranch. Next, the third was poetry, bad poetry. Your eyes I've never seen, yet in my dreams they shine, / your voice I've never heard, yet it whispers, you'll be mine. The stars above Colorado will witness our love's birth, as I pledge to you, sweet widow, my devotion and my worth. She didn't even finish it, just crumpled it up and threw it toward the fireplace. Missed. The next 10 were variations on the same themes. Rich men promising luxury, working men promising partnership, young men promising passion, old men promising stability. Some included photographs. Some included detailed financial statements. One included what appeared to be a lock of hair, which was either romantic or deeply disturbing. She poured another whiskey. By letter 25, they all started blending together. She could barely keep track of who was who. The banker from Colorado Springs, the mining foreman from Leadville, the cattle buyer from Cheyenne, all of them promising something, all of them wanting something in return. Her head was starting to pound. She almost missed it. Letter 37, tucked near the bottom of the pile. The envelope was plain brown paper, water-stained and wrinkled. No wax seal, no fancy script. Her name and the store's address were written in rough block letters that looked like they'd been carved more than written. She opened it. The paper inside was even rougher, the kind you'd use to wrap supplies, not write letters. And there were maybe 8 lines total. Mrs. Harper, I seen your advertisement. I ain't no businessman or fancy gentleman. I live alone up in the mountains west of Silver Creek. Been trapping for near 10 years. I can work hard and I don't drink or gamble. I don't know nothing about romance or sweet talk, but I can fix what's broke and protect what's mine. If that's enough, then write back care of Henderson's Trading Post. Silas Boone. That was it? No promises, no flattery, no photograph. Just 8 lines of brutal honesty that somehow hit harder than all 36 previous letters combined. Evelyn read it 3 times. There was something about it, something that made her chest feel tight. Every other man had tried to sell himself. Look at my money. Look at my land. Look at my refinement. The Silas Boone hadn't sold anything. He just stated facts and let her decide. I don't know nothing about romance or sweet talk. At least he was honest about it. She set the letter aside and forced herself to read through the remaining 3. A widower with 4 children who needed a mother. A young farmer who seemed sweet but barely literate. A traveling merchant who promised to show her the world. None of them mattered. She kept coming back to letter 37. I can fix what's broke and protect what's mine. The whiskey was making her warm. Or maybe it was something else. She read the letter again, studying the handwriting. Every letter was carefully formed, like someone who'd learned to write late in life and took it seriously. The paper smelled like wood smoke and pine. Who was this man? This Silas Boone who lived alone in the mountains and didn't know how to lie. She should choose this businessman, the safe choice, the rich man in Denver who could pay off her debts and give her a comfortable life. She should choose the practical rancher, the one who understood cattle and land and hard work. She should definitely not choose the mysterious mountain trapper who probably looked like something that crawled out of a cave, but something about that letter wouldn't let her go. The next morning, she rode into town before she could change her mind. Marcus looked up when she walked into the store, his eyebrows rising. That was fast. I need to send a message. She pulled out a piece of paper where she'd written 4 lines. To Henderson's Trading Post, for a man named Silas Boone. Marcus read it. His face went carefully blank. You're sure about this? No. She met his eyes. Send it anyway. The message was simple. Mr. Boone, I received your letter. I would like to meet you to discuss your proposal. I can come to Henderson's Trading Post next Tuesday at noon, if that suits you. Evelyn Harper. She paid for the telegram and left before Marcus could say anything else. The week crawled by. She threw herself into work, mending fence, mucking stalls, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. What was she doing? She was about to meet a complete stranger to discuss marriage like it was a business transaction. Because that's what it was. A transaction. Love had nothing to do with it. Love was what she'd had with Thomas. Sweet, gentle Thomas, who used to bring her wildflowers and read to her by the fire. Thomas was gone. This was survival. Tuesday morning arrived cold and gray. She dressed in her best dress, which wasn't saying much, and tried to do something with her hair. It didn't help. She looked like exactly what she was, a 24-year-old widow who'd aged 10 years and 3 months. The ride to Henderson's trading post took most of the morning. It sat at the edge of civilization, where the foothills started turning into real mountains. Beyond it, there was nothing but wilderness, and whatever wild things lived there. She tied Bess to the hitching post and walked inside. Henderson, a grizzled man with one eye and a tobacco habit, looked up from his counter. "Help you?" "I'm looking for Silas Boone. He should be expecting me." Henderson's good eye studied her for a long moment. Then he jerked his thumb toward the back door. Out back, by the creek. Her heart was hammering. This was stupid. This was insane. She should turn around and ride home and marry the businessman in Denver and forget about mysterious mountain trappers who... She walked out the back door. The creek rushed past about 20 yards from the building, swollen with snowmelt, and standing beside it, staring at the water, was the biggest man she'd ever seen. Not fat, not soft, just big. He had to be at least 6'3", with shoulders that looked like they could carry a full-grown cow. His hair was dark and shaggy, his beard thick and untrimmed. He wore buckskin pants and a rough wool shirt that had seen better days. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and Evelyn forgot how to breathe. His face was all hard angles and old scars. A long white line ran from his left temple down to his jaw. Another crossed his right cheekbone. His eyes were dark, so dark they were almost black, and they watched her with an intensity that made her want to run. But she didn't run. She'd come too far for that. "Mr. Boone?" "Ma'am?" His voice was deep and rough, like gravel grinding together. He didn't move closer, just stood there, watching her. "You came." "I said I would." Most folks don't mean what they say. There was no accusation in it, just a statement of fact from someone who'd clearly learned it the hard way. "I'm not most folks," she said. Something flickered in those dark eyes. Might have been amusement, might have been respect. "No, ma'am. I don't expect you are." They stood there for a moment, sizing each other up. He didn't try to smile or charm her, didn't make small talk about the weather, just waited. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "Your letter was different from the others." "How many others?" 40. His eyebrows went up slightly. That was the most expression she'd seen from him. 40 men want to marry you, and you're here talking to the one who lives in a shack and smells like bear? Despite everything, she almost smiled. The other 39 were liars. "And I'm not?" "I don't know yet." She took a step closer. Not too close, just enough to show she wasn't afraid. "But at least you didn't promise me the moon." He studied her face, really looked at her, not like the men in town who either pitied her or tried to look down her dress. He looked at her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You're younger than I thought," he said finally. "You're bigger than I thought." "That bother you? Should it?" Another flicker of something in his eyes. "Some women are afraid of men like me." "Are you afraid of women like me?" He considered that. "Yes, ma'am." Terrified. That surprised a laugh out of her, a real laugh. The first one in months. His expression softened just a fraction. "You got questions. Ask them." She did. For the next hour, they stood by that creek and talked. Or rather, she asked and he answered. Where did he live? A cabin about 10 miles west. What did he do? Trapped in winter, hunted in summer, traded furs when he needed supplies. Did he have family? Not anymore. Could he handle ranch work? He'd grown up on a farm before heading into the mountains. Why did he answer her advertisement? That one made him pause. Been alone a long time, he said finally. Thought maybe I was done with people. Then I seen your advertisement and figured... He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Figured what? Figured you sounded like someone who'd understand what it's like to be alone. Something in Evelyn's chest cracked open. She asked more practical questions. Could he work cattle? Yes. Fix buildings? Yes. Handle a gun? He gave her a look that said that was the stupidest question she could have asked. She asked about his expectations. He said he expected to work hard and earn his keep. She asked what he wanted from her. Honestly? He looked at the mountains. Company. Someone to talk to that ain't a horse or a pine tree. Maybe a reason to stay in one place instead of wandering until I die. That's all? He met her eyes. I ain't gonna lie to you, ma'am. You're a handsome woman. But I know what this is. You need help. I need something else. If more than that happens, fine. If it don't, that's fine too. I just want to be clear from the start. Evelyn should have been insulted or relieved. Instead, she felt something close to gratitude. He wasn't pretending, wasn't playing games, just telling her the truth and letting her decide. I need to think about it, she said. He nodded. Figured you would. I'll be at Henderson's through Friday if you want to send word. After that, I'm heading back up the mountain. She should have left then. Should have ridden back to Silver Creek and carefully considered all her options. Made a rational decision. Instead, she heard herself say, I'm not sure I can trust you. You shouldn't. He didn't hesitate. You don't know me from Adam. I could be exactly what you need or the worst mistake you ever made. Only way to find out is to take the gamble. That's not very reassuring. No, ma'am. But it's the truth. There it was again, that brutal honesty that should have scared her off but somehow did the opposite. The ranch is failing, she said suddenly. The debts are piling up. I'm barely holding on. If you come with me, you'll be working yourself half to death for something that might fall apart anyway. Might not. The odds aren't good. Been beating bad odds my whole life. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that this massive, scarred stranger could somehow save everything. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. I had a husband, she said quietly. A good man. Kind. Gentle. He loved me, and I loved him, and it wasn't enough to keep him alive. I can't go through that again. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I can't promise I won't die, ma'am. Can't promise this'll work out. Can't promise much of anything except I'll try my damnedest not to fail you. Why? The word came out sharper than she meant. Why do you care? You don't know me. No, ma'am, but I know what it's like to be desperate, and I know what it's like when nobody helps. He looked at the mountains again. Figured maybe it's time I did something that mattered. Evelyn felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. She would not cry in front of this stranger. She wouldn't. I should go, she said. Yes, ma'am. She made it 3 steps before she turned back. If I said yes, would you come to the ranch first before anything was decided? I need to know you can actually do the work. That's fair. And I need time. I can't just marry a stranger in a week. Take all the time you need. She nodded, started to leave again, stopped. Why didn't you lie to me? She asked. All those other men, they promised me everything. You didn't promise anything. You could have made this easier on yourself. Silas looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Because if you picked me based on a lie, he said slowly, you'd regret it eventually. Rather have you pick me knowing exactly what you're getting. And what am I getting? A man who don't know how to be anything but what he is. Evelyn rode home in a daze. Her mind was spinning. This was crazy. She should choose the businessman, or the rancher, or literally anyone other than a mountain hermit who looked like he could snap her in half without trying. But that night, lying in bed, she kept thinking about his eyes, about the way he'd answered every question without flinching, about how he'd looked at the mountains like they were the only thing in the world that made sense. I know what it's like to be desperate. She made her decision 3 days later. The message she sent to Henderson's was even simpler than the first. Come to the ranch. We'll try it for a month. If it works, we'll discuss marriage. If it doesn't, you're free to go. Marcus looked at her like she'd lost her mind when she sent it. Maybe she had. Silas Boone arrived at the ranch 6 days later, riding a horse that looked as wild as he did, and leading a pack mule that carried everything he owned. Evelyn watched from the porch as he dismounted and looked around at the property, the sagging fences, the damaged barn, the house that needed work. He didn't comment on any of it, just turned to her and said, "Where do you want me to start?" Over the next 3 weeks, Evelyn learned that Silas Boone didn't know how to do anything halfway. He worked from sunup to sundown, fixing everything that was broken and then fixing things she didn't even know needed fixing. He rebuilt the entire north fence in 4 days, repaired the barn roof, cleared the irrigation ditches, fixed the chicken coop that had been leaning sideways for months. He barely spoke, just worked with a quiet, relentless intensity that was almost frightening. At night, he slept in the barn, never asked to come in the house, never tried to get close to her, just ate the meals she left for him, thanked her politely, and went back to work. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it made her uneasy. She didn't know what to make of him. He was nothing like Thomas. Thomas had been talkative, social, easy to read. Silas was a locked door. She had no idea what he was thinking or feeling or whether he regretted coming down from his mountain. 2 weeks in, she found him behind the barn after dark, sitting on the ground with his back against the wall. She almost didn't approach, but something about the way he was sitting, shoulders slumped, head down, made her stop. "Are you hurt?" He looked up, startled, like he'd forgotten she existed. "No, ma'am, just tired." She sat down beside him without thinking about it. He went very still. They sat in silence for a while. The night was cold but clear, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. "You don't have to work so hard," she said finally. "You're going to kill yourself." "Ranch needs work." "The ranch needed work when Thomas was alive too. It'll survive if you take a day off." He didn't answer. "Silas." She used his first name for the first time. "Why are you really here?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then very quietly, "Needed a reason not to disappear." The words hung in the cold air. "Disappear where?" she asked. "Nowhere. That's the problem." He looked at the stars. "You spend enough time alone in the mountains. You start wondering if you're even real. If anyone would notice if you just stopped existing." Evelyn's throat went tight. "I would notice," she said. He turned to look at her. Really look at her. And for the first time she saw past the scars and the size and the walls he'd built. Saw the loneliness that matched her own. "You don't know me," he said. "I'm starting to." Something shifted between them. Something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. He was so close, so big, so solid. Everything about him should have scared her. Instead, she felt safer than she had in months. "I should go inside," she whispered. "Yes, ma'am." Neither of them moved. Then Silas stood up in one fluid movement and offered her his hand. She took it. His palm was rough and calloused, but his grip was gentle as he pulled her to her feet. He didn't let go right away. "Evelyn." Her name in his rough voice did something to her insides. "If this ain't what you want, if you're having second thoughts, now's the time to say so." "Are you having second thoughts?" "Every damn day." His honesty startled a laugh out of her. "But I'm still here. So am I." They stood there in the darkness, hands still clasped. And Evelyn made a decision that terrified her more than anything else she'd done. "Marry me," she said. His eyes went wide. "What?" "The month's not up yet, but I don't need more time. You're the hardest working man I've ever met. You haven't lied to me once, and you're—" She stopped, started again. "I think we could make this work, if you're willing." "You sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." For the first time since she'd met him, Silas Boone smiled. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger, almost happy. "All right then," he said. "Let's get married." They were wed 3 days later in a ceremony that took less than 10 minutes. The preacher looked dubious. The handful of townspeople who attended whispered behind their hands. Marcus gave her one last chance to back out. She didn't take it. Silas wore clean clothes that Henderson had found for him. She wore her wedding dress from when she married Thomas, which felt wrong, but she didn't have another one. When the preacher asked if she took this man, she said, "I do," and meant it. When Silas slipped a simple band on her finger, thick silver, no stone, his hands shook slightly. And when they were pronounced married, he looked at her like she'd given him something precious that he didn't know how to hold without breaking. That night, Silas moved his things from the barn to the house, not into her bedroom, into the second room that had been Thomas's office. He set up his bedroll in the corner without comment. Evelyn stood in the doorway watching him. "This is your house too now," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You don't have to sleep on the floor." He looked at her. "Where should I sleep?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. "I don't know yet," she admitted. But not on the floor. He smiled slightly. I've slept in worse places. They established an awkward routine. Silas worked during the day. Evelyn cooked and managed the household and helped where she could. At night, they sat at the table and ate dinner together in near silence. It should have been uncomfortable. Somehow it wasn't. 1 week became 2, 2 became 3. The ranch continued improving. The cattle looked healthier. The buildings stood straighter. Everything Silas touched seemed to transform. But the real transformation was happening inside the house. Slowly, so slowly she barely noticed it happening. They started talking, real talking. She told him about Thomas, about the life she'd imagined before the fever destroyed it. He told her about growing up poor, about heading into the mountains to escape a father who used his fists more than his words. She learned he could read but struggled with it. He learned she was good with numbers and better with planning than she gave herself credit for. She learned he had nightmares sometimes. She could hear him through the walls, making sounds like a wounded animal. He learned she cried silently in the dark, thinking she was being quiet enough that no one would hear. They didn't talk about any of it, but they knew. 6 weeks after the wedding, everything changed. A storm rolled in, one of those violent spring storms that turned the sky black and sent animals running for cover. Evelyn was in the house when she heard Silas shouting. She ran outside and found him near the creek, which had overflowed its banks and was threatening to flood the lower pasture. He was trying to dig a trench to divert the water, but it was hopeless. The rain was coming down too hard. "Get inside," he yelled when he saw her. "Not without you!" "Evelyn, go!" She grabbed a shovel instead and started digging beside him. He stared at her for one stunned second, then went back to work. They fought that flood for 3 hours. By the time they managed to divert enough water to save the pasture, they were both soaked to the bone and covered in mud. Silas was bleeding from a cut on his arm, where debris had hit him. Evelyn's hands were raw and blistered. They stumbled back to the house together, exhausted. Inside, Evelyn lit the fire while Silas peeled off his ruined shirt. She turned to tell him she'd find him clean clothes and froze. His back was a map of scars, old ones, thick, raised lines that could only have come from a whip or a belt. He must have felt her staring because he went very still. "My father," he said quietly, not turning around. "Before I left." Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. "How old were you?" 15 when I finally ran. Took most of those before then." She wanted to say something, couldn't find the words. Instead, she walked across the room and put her hand on his scarred back. He flinched, then went very still again. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," she whispered. He turned to face her. His eyes were blazing with something she couldn't name. "Evelyn, I was wrong," she said. The words came out in a rush. "When I said this was just business, when I said I didn't expect more than work, I was lying to myself. Because every day I watch you break yourself trying to save this place, and She didn't get to finish. Because Silas crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't sweet. It was desperate and fierce and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Tell me to stop," he said roughly. "If you don't want this, tell me now." Instead of answering, Evelyn pulled him back down and kissed him again. That night, the business arrangement became something else entirely. Something neither of them had planned for or expected. Something that felt like falling and flying at the same time. The next morning, Evelyn woke up in Silas's arms. The first time she'd woken up next to someone since Thomas died. She should have felt guilty, should have felt like she was betraying her first husband's memory. Instead, she felt alive. Silas was already awake, watching her with those dark eyes. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning." They lay there for a moment, and Evelyn waited for the panic to set in. The regret. The shame. It never came. "I love you," she said. The words came out simple and clear. "I don't know when it happened, but I do." Silas's expression did something complicated. "You sure? Because once you say that, I ain't letting you take it back." "I'm sure." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "I loved you the day you rode to Henderson's," he whispered. "Scared the hell out of me." Evelyn laughed, then cried, then kissed him until neither of them could think straight. They spent that whole day in bed, talking and touching and learning each other. He showed her his scars and told her the stories behind them. She showed him hers, the ones that didn't show on the outside. By the time the sun set, they weren't strangers anymore. They weren't even a business arrangement. They were something new, something that belonged only to them. But happiness on the frontier never lasted long. 2 weeks later, a rider came to the ranch. Evelyn recognized him, one of Caleb Mercer's men. He sat on his horse and didn't bother dismounting. "Mr. Mercer wants to talk to you about selling," he said to Evelyn, completely ignoring Silas. "He's prepared to make a very generous offer." "The ranch isn't for sale," Evelyn said. "Ma'am, with all due respect," she said no. Silas stepped forward. The hired man's horse skittered backward. "You should leave now." The man looked at Silas, really looked at him, and whatever he saw made him pale slightly. "Mr. Mercer isn't going to like this." "Don't care what Mercer likes," Silas said flatly. "This is our land. Tell him if he wants it, he can go to hell." The rider left at a gallop. Evelyn looked at her husband. "That's going to cause problems." "I know." "Mercer's powerful, rich. He's got friends in high places." "I know that too." "So what do we do?" Silas looked at the ranch, their ranch now, and his jaw set in that stubborn line she was learning to recognize. "We fight," he said simply. "We build this place into something so strong they can't tear it down. And if they try," his eyes went cold, "then I remind them why most people are afraid of men like me." Evelyn should have been worried, should have tried to find a peaceful solution. Instead, she took his hand and smiled. "All right then," she said. "Let's fight." The first attack came on a Tuesday morning in late April, quiet enough that Evelyn almost missed it. She was checking the chicken coop when she noticed the fence posts along the eastern property line had been knocked down. Not weather damage, not rot. Someone had deliberately pulled them out of the ground and scattered them across the grass. Silas found her standing there, staring at the destruction. "How long ago?" he asked. "Couldn't have been more than a few hours. The wood's still fresh where it split." He crouched down, studying the ground. His face went hard. 3 riders, maybe 4, came in from Mercer's land, did the damage, went back the same way. "You can tell all that from hoof prints?" "Spent 10 years tracking animals that didn't want to be found. Men are easier." He stood up, brushing dirt off his hands. "They're testing us, seeing how we'll react." Evelyn felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What do we do?" "Fix it. Make it stronger than before. Show them we're not going anywhere." They spent the next 3 days rebuilding that section of fence. Silas didn't just replace the posts, he dug them deeper, reinforced them with extra bracing, strung the wire tighter. When he was done, it looked like a damn fortress. "Let them try knocking this down," he muttered. 2 weeks later, they tried something else. Evelyn woke up to Silas shaking her shoulder. It was still dark outside. "Get dressed," he said quietly. "Don't light a lamp." She was awake instantly. "What's wrong?" "Someone's out by the cattle." She threw on clothes and followed him outside. The moon was half full, bright enough to see shapes moving in the darkness near the herd. Silas had his rifle. She grabbed Thomas's old shotgun from beside the door. They moved quietly through the grass, getting closer. Evelyn could hear voices now, 2 men, maybe 3, trying to move some of the cattle toward the property line. Silas stopped about 50 yards away and raised his rifle, not aiming at the men, just making sure they could see it in the moonlight. "Those are our cattle," he called out. His voice carried across the darkness like a whip crack. "Touch them again, and I'll put a bullet in you." The voices went silent. Then one of them yelled back, "Mercer's offering good money for strays." "These ain't strays. They're on our land, eating our grass, which makes them ours." Silas took a step forward. "Now get the hell off my property before I decide you're strays, too." There was a long pause, then the sound of horses moving fast, heading back toward Mercer's ranch. Evelyn lowered the shotgun. Her hands were shaking. "They were going to steal them." "Yep, just like that. The middle of the night. Easier to claim they wandered off if nobody sees them being taken." Silas was still watching the darkness where the riders had disappeared. "We're going to have to start keeping watch at night." "Both of us?" "I can handle it." "Like hell." Evelyn turned to face him. "You already work yourself half to death during the day. You can't stay up all night, too." "Got no choice. We'll take shifts. I can shoot as well as you can." That made him smile slightly. "Can you?" "Try me." They started alternating night watches. Evelyn would take the first half of the night, Silas the second. It meant neither of them got much sleep, but at least the cattle stayed put. The harassment continued, cut irrigation lines, scattered supplies. A broken wheel on the wagon that could have been an accident but probably wasn't. Nothing big enough to cause real damage, just constant small annoyances designed to wear them down. It was working. Evelyn could feel herself getting thinner, more exhausted. The constant vigilance was eating away at her. She snapped at Silas over stupid things. He withdrew into himself, speaking less and less. One night in early June, they had their first real fight. It started over nothing. Evelyn had forgotten to close the barn door and some of the chickens got out. Silas found her chasing them in the dark, cursing under her breath. "You need to be more careful," he said. "I know that. If we lose chickens, we lose eggs. We lose eggs, we lose money we can't afford to lose." I said, "I know." She caught one of the birds and shoved it back toward the coop. "I just forgot. I'm tired. We're both tired." Being tired ain't an excuse for being careless. Something in his tone made her stop. Turn around. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Don't you dare talk to me like I'm some kind of idiot. I've been running this ranch longer than you've been here, and it was failing when I got here." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Evelyn felt like he'd slapped her. "Get out!" Silas blinked. "What?" "Get out of my sight before I say something I'll regret." "Evelyn, now." He left. She heard his footsteps heading toward the barn, heard the door slam. She stood there in the darkness, shaking with anger and exhaustion, and something that felt dangerously close to despair. He was right. The ranch had been failing. She'd been drowning before he showed up, but hearing him say it out loud felt like admitting she was worthless, that Thomas had died and left her with something she couldn't handle alone. She went inside and cried until she couldn't anymore. Then she sat at the kitchen table and stared at the lamp flame, too tired to move. Around midnight, the door opened. Silas stood there, looking like he'd aged 10 years. "I'm sorry," he said. She didn't answer. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded. The ranch wasn't failing because of you. It was failing because one person can't do everything alone. That's why you needed help. That's why I'm here." He took a step inside. "I was an ass. I'm tired and angry, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry." Evelyn felt some of the tension drain out of her shoulders. "I should have closed the door. And I should have kept my mouth shut." He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. "This is what they want. They want us fighting each other instead of fighting them. I know. So we need to stop giving them what they want." She looked at him, really looked at him. He had dark circles under his eyes. His clothes hung looser than they had a month ago. He was killing himself trying to protect this place, trying to protect her. "I love you," she said. His expression softened. "I love you too, even when you leave the damn barn door open." That startled a laugh out of her. He smiled and pulled her into his arms. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, and Evelyn felt something shift. They were stronger together than apart. Whatever Mercer threw at them, they'd face it together. The next escalation came a week later. Evelyn was in town buying supplies when she overheard two women talking outside the general store. Heard Mercer's offering jobs to anyone willing to work his new expansion. What expansion? The Harper place. He's already drawing up plans for what he'll do once he gets it. Evelyn stepped around the corner. He's not getting it. Both women jumped. One of them, Sarah Mitchell, the baker's wife, had the decency to look embarrassed. "Mrs. Boone, we were just—" "Repeating gossip?" Evelyn kept her voice level. "Mercer doesn't own our ranch. He never will." "Of course not. We just heard—" "You heard wrong." Evelyn picked up her supply basket. "And you can tell anyone else who's listening that the Boones aren't going anywhere." She paid for her supplies and left before they could say anything else. But the conversation stuck with her. Mercer wasn't just harassing them anymore. He was already planning what he'd do with their land, like it was inevitable that they'd fail. When she got home, Silas was working on the barn roof. She told him what she'd heard. "He's that confident?" Silas drove a nail in harder than necessary. "Thinks we'll just roll over?" "Apparently. Then we need to prove him wrong." He climbed down the ladder. "How much money do we have saved?" "Not much. Why?" "We need to expand. Get more cattle. Show everyone we're not just surviving, We're growing. He wiped sweat off his forehead. People respect success. Right now, we look like we're barely hanging on. We need to look like we're thriving. With what money? We sell some of the breeding stock. Use that money to buy younger cattle. It's a risk, but if we can get them through the summer, we'll have double the herd by next spring. Evelyn did the math in her head. If we lose any of them, we won't. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure we don't. He took her hands. Trust me. She did, which was either the smartest or stupidest decision she'd ever made. They sold 6 head of breeding cattle and bought 15 younger ones. It cleaned out their savings and then some. For 2 weeks, Evelyn barely slept, terrified that something would go wrong and they'd lose everything. But Silas seemed to thrive on the pressure. He moved the expanded herd to the best grazing land, set up better water access, spent his nights riding the property line, making sure nothing happened to them. And slowly, painfully slowly, it started working. The cattle grew fat and healthy. Other ranchers started noticing, started asking Silas for advice on grazing rotation and water management. By mid-July, people stopped looking at them with pity and started looking at them with respect. Mercer noticed too. The attacks got worse. Someone cut the fence again, but this time they drove some of the cattle through the gap. Silas spent 3 days tracking them down and bringing them back. Found 2 dead from what looked like deliberate poisoning. Evelyn wanted to go to the sheriff. Silas talked her out of it. Sheriff's in Mercer's pocket, has been for years. We report this. It'll disappear into paperwork and nothing will happen except Mercer will know he's getting to us. So we just take it? No. We make it too expensive to continue. His eyes went cold. They want to play dirty? Fine. But they're going to learn I know how to play dirtier. That night, Silas left the ranch after dark. He didn't tell Evelyn where he was going. She didn't ask. He came back just before dawn, looking grim. What did you do? She asked. Had a conversation with Mercer's foreman. Explained that if anything else happens to our cattle, the same thing will happen to his. Only worse. Silas. He understood. Silas started making coffee. Won't stop Mercer, but it'll make him think twice about sending his men to do the dirty work. You can't threaten people. Wasn't a threat. Was a promise. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there had to be a better way. But she'd grown up on the frontier. She knew how things worked out here. The law only went so far. After that, you protected what was yours however you could. The attacks slowed down after that. Not because Mercer gave up, but because he was planning something bigger. It came in August. Evelyn and Silas were eating dinner when they heard horses approaching. A lot of them. Silas grabbed his rifle and went to the door. 6 riders sat on their horses in the yard. Mercer himself was in the lead, dressed in expensive clothes that looked ridiculous out here. He was maybe 50, with silver hair and the kind of face that smiled while scheming. Mr. Boone, Mrs. Boone. He touched his hat. I apologize for the late hour. What do you want, Mercer? Silas didn't lower the rifle. To make you an offer. A generous one. Mercer pulled out a paper. I'm prepared to pay $15,000 for this property. Cash. You could be settled somewhere else by the end of the month. $15,000 was more than the ranch was worth. Enough to buy property somewhere else and still have money left over. It was a good offer. It was also an insult. No, Silas said. You haven't even looked at the number. Don't need to. This is our home. It's not for sale. Mercer's smile thinned. Mr. Boone, I'm trying to be reasonable. This land has strategic value that I'm willing to pay for, but if you refuse, I can make things very difficult for you. You've already been making things difficult. Evelyn stepped up beside Silas. The fence cutting, the poisoned cattle, the harassment. You think we don't know that was you? I have no idea what you're talking about, Mrs. Boone, though I have heard there's been trouble in the area. Dangerous country out here. All sorts of accidents can happen. His eyes were flat and cold despite the smile. It would be a shame if something happened to you. Or your husband. Silas took a step forward. The men behind Mercer tensed. You threatening my wife? Silas's voice was soft. Deadly. I'm offering friendly advice. This land isn't worth dying over. Maybe not to you. Silas raised the rifle slightly. Not aiming, just reminding everyone it was there. But it's ours. And if you or any of your men set foot on it again without permission, I'll shoot first and ask questions later. That clear enough for you?" Mercer stared at him. Silas stared back. Neither man blinked. Finally, Mercer smiled again. It didn't reach his eyes. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Boone. Won't be my first, probably won't be my last." Mercer wheeled his horse around. "When you change your mind, and you will, don't expect the same offer. The price goes down every day you refuse." They rode off in a cloud of dust. Evelyn realized she was shaking. "He just threatened to kill us." "Yep." "And you threatened to shoot him." "Yep." "This is going to get worse, isn't it?" Silas lowered the rifle. "Probably, but we knew that when we decided to fight." That night, neither of them slept. They sat on the porch with rifles across their laps, watching the darkness. Every sound made them jump. Every shadow looked like a threat. Nothing happened. But the waiting was almost worse than an attack would have been. The next few weeks were tense. Evelyn jumped at every unexpected sound. Silas barely left the property, constantly watching for trouble. The stress was eating both of them alive. Then, in early September, everything changed. Evelyn woke up feeling sick. Not just tired, actually sick. She barely made it outside before throwing up. Silas found her leaning against the porch railing, pale and sweating. "You all right?" "I don't know. Something I ate, maybe." But it happened again the next morning. And the morning after that. By the fourth day, Evelyn knew what it meant. She'd been through this before, years ago, with Thomas. A pregnancy that ended at 3 months, leaving her heartbroken and empty. She didn't tell Silas right away. Couldn't bring herself to say the words in case she was wrong. In case history repeated itself and she lost this baby too. But her body kept giving her away. The morning sickness. The exhaustion. The way certain smells made her stomach turn. Finally, 2 weeks later, Silas cornered her in the kitchen. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. Evelyn looked at him and nodded. His face went through about 6 different expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, fear, joy, terror. Then he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms so tight she could barely breathe. "How long have you known?" he asked against her hair. "I suspected for a while. Didn't want to say anything until I was sure." "Are you sure now?" "Pretty sure." He pulled back to look at her. His eyes were wet. "I'm going to be a father." "You're going to be a father." "I don't know how to be a father." "Neither did Thomas." "You figure it out as you go." She touched his face. "Are you happy?" Terrified. "But yeah, happy." He kissed her forehead. "When?" "Spring, probably. March or April." The reality of it settled over them. A baby. New life. In the middle of a war with Mercer that was getting more dangerous by the day. "We need to end this," Silas said quietly, "before the baby comes. I won't raise a child in constant fear." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." That night, they lay in bed talking about names and futures and all the things they'd do when the baby came. For a few hours, they let themselves forget about Mercer and focus on something good. But reality came crashing back 2 days later. Evelyn was hanging laundry when she smelled smoke, not wood smoke from the stove. Something bigger, darker. She ran around the house and froze. The barn was on fire. Flames were already climbing the walls, thick black smoke pouring into the sky. She could hear the horses inside screaming in panic. "Silas!" She ran toward the barn, but the heat drove her back. He came running from the far pasture, saw the fire, and didn't hesitate. Just ran straight through the barn door into the smoke and flames. "No!" Evelyn screamed. "Silas, don't!" But he was already inside. The next 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. Evelyn stood outside watching flames consume the barn, unable to do anything. She could hear crashing sounds inside. More screaming from the horses. Silas shouting something she couldn't understand. Then he staggered out, leading one of the horses. Its coat was singed, eyes rolling white with terror. He slapped it away from the barn and disappeared back inside. He came out with the second horse, then went back in. "Silas, stop!" Evelyn tried to grab him. "It's too dangerous." "There's more inside." "Let them go. I can't lose you." But he was already gone again. This time, he was inside longer. Too long. Evelyn watched the barn roof start to sag. heard timbers cracking. Any second now, the whole thing would collapse. "Silas!" she screamed. He burst through the door carrying something small in his arms. The stable hand's son, a kid named Tommy, maybe 12 years old, who helped with chores after school. The boy was unconscious, his face covered in soot. Silas laid him on the ground and started pumping his chest. Tommy coughed, gasped, started breathing again. Evelyn collapsed to her knees beside them, crying. Behind them, the barn roof caved in with a sound like the end of the world. Silas turned to look at it. His face and arms were covered in burns. His clothes were smoking, but he was alive. "Everyone out?" Evelyn asked through tears. "Everyone but the chickens. Couldn't find them in the smoke." "To hell with the chickens. You're alive." He looked at her, at Tommy, who was sitting up now, crying for his mother. At the burning barn. "Who did this?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. I was hanging laundry and then it was just burning. Someone set it. I smelled kerosene when I went in." Rage flooded through Evelyn. "Mercer." "Probably. But we can't prove it." "I don't care about proof." She stood up, shaking. "This ends. Now. Tonight." "Evelyn?" "No, I'm done. He tried to kill you. He tried to kill a child. This isn't about land anymore. It's about whether we're going to let a monster terrorize us until he gets what he wants." Silas looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. What do you want to do?" "I want to go into town. I want to tell everyone what happened, and I want them to see what Mercer's willing to do to get this land." "They might not believe you." "Then we make them believe." They loaded Tommy into the wagon. He was bruised and scared, but otherwise okay, and headed into town. By the time they arrived, word had already spread. Half the town was standing in the street, watching the smoke rise from their ranch in the distance. Evelyn climbed down from the wagon. Her dress was covered in ash. Silas looked like he'd walked through hell. "Caleb Mercer set fire to our barn," she announced loudly. "He tried to kill my husband and this boy to force us off our land." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Boone," the sheriff said. "He was a heavy man named Bill Carson, who everyone knew took money from Mercer." "You got proof?" "I've got a burned barn and a husband covered in burns and a traumatized child. What more proof do you need?" "Could have been an accident." "It smelled like kerosene," Silas said. His voice cut through the noise. "Someone poured accelerant and lit it. This wasn't an accident." "Even so, you can't just accuse—" "Where's Mercer?" Evelyn interrupted. "If he's innocent, let him come here and say so to our faces." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Now, Mrs. Boone, I'm here." The crowd parted. Caleb Mercer rode through on his expensive horse, looking calm and composed, like he hadn't just tried to kill them. "I heard there was a fire at your property," he said. "Terrible tragedy. You have my sympathies." "Save it," Evelyn snapped. "We know you did this. That's a very serious accusation. Do you have any evidence? You threatened us 2 weeks ago, said accidents happen, and now our barn mysteriously burns down? That's not a coincidence." Mercer smiled. "I suggested you sell before something unfortunate happened. I didn't say I would make it happen. Your property is old and poorly maintained. Fires happen." "There was kerosene. Could have been from your own lamps. Could have spilled. Could have been knocked over." He looked around at the crowd. "These good people know I'm a businessman, not an arsonist. I make offers. I don't make threats." Evelyn wanted to scream. He was lying right to their faces, and everyone knew it, but without proof, there was nothing they could do. Then Tommy spoke up. "I saw him." Everyone turned. The boy was still in the wagon, wrapped in a blanket, his face pale. "What did you see, son?" the sheriff asked. "A man, riding away from the barn right before it started burning. He was on a big gray horse." Tommy pointed at one of Mercer's men. "That horse. I remember because it has a white blaze on its face." The crowd turned to look at the hired man. He went pale. "The boy's mistaken," Mercer said quickly. "He was in a burning barn, probably saw something else." "I know what I saw," Tommy insisted. "It was that horse, and the man riding it was coming from your ranch." Silence fell over the crowd. The sheriff looked between Tommy and Mercer's hired man. "That true? You were at the Boone Ranch today?" The man glanced at Mercer. Mercer gave a tiny shake of his head. But the man had kids of his own. Evelyn could see it on his face, the moment he decided he wasn't willing to lie to cover up attempted murder. I was there, he admitted quietly. But I didn't know what was going to happen. Mr. Mercer just told me to ride out and check the property, said he wanted to know what improvements they'd made. And the fire? Silas asked. I don't know nothing about that, I swear. I just rode by and left. He's lying, Mercer said coldly. I never sent him anywhere. Yes, you did. The man's voice got stronger. You sent me, and you sent Jake here last month to cut their fence. And you sent Carson to poison their water. We all know it. Everyone's known it. We just didn't want to admit it because you pay well. Another silence. This one heavier. Mercer's face went red. You're fired, all of you. Anyone who believes this nonsense is fired. But the damage was done. People were looking at Mercer differently now, seeing him for what he really was. Marcus stepped forward. I think you should leave, Caleb. This is ridiculous. Leave. Before someone decides to do to you what you tried to do to the Boones. Mercer looked around at the crowd, at faces that had been friendly before and were now closed off. Hostile. He turned his horse and rode away without another word. The crowd slowly dispersed. People came up to Evelyn and Silas offering help, offering lumber to rebuild the barn, offering to keep watch, offering genuine support for the first time since this all started. Marcus pulled Evelyn aside. You did it. You turned them against him. It wasn't me. It was Tommy. She looked at the boy who was being fussed over by his mother. A child had more courage than grown men. Sometimes that's what it takes. That night, Evelyn and Silas stood in front of their ruined barn, watching the last embers die. They were exhausted, burned, bruised, but alive. We won, Evelyn said quietly. For now. You think you'll try again? Maybe, but it'll be harder now. Everyone's watching. Silas put his arm around her. We've got allies now. That changes things. Evelyn leaned against him, feeling the baby flutter inside her. New life. New hope. They'd survived. Together. And whatever came next, they'd face that together too. The barn rebuilding started 3 days after the fire, and it felt like the entire town showed up. Marcus arrived at dawn with 2 wagons full of lumber. The Mitchell brothers brought tools and strong backs. Even old Henderson rode down from his trading post with nails and hardware he claimed he'd found in the back, but everyone knew he'd paid for out of his own pocket. Silas stood in the yard, watching people arrive, looking like he'd been hit in the head with a board. I don't understand, he said to Evelyn. Half these people wouldn't give me the time of day 2 months ago. You saved Tommy, she said. People remember things like that. I just did what anyone would have done. No, you did what a good man would do. There's a difference. By mid-morning, the foundation was laid. By afternoon, the frame was going up. Men sawed and hammered while women brought food and water. Kids ran around getting in the way, but nobody seemed to mind. Evelyn watched from the porch, her hand resting on her belly. The baby was getting more active now, kicking hard enough that she could feel it from the outside. 3.5 months along and starting to show, though she could still hide it under loose dresses. She hadn't told anyone except Silas yet. Wasn't sure why. Maybe because saying it out loud made it feel real, and real things could be taken away. Sarah Mitchell sat down beside her with 2 cups of water. You feeling all right? You look pale. Just tired. Well, don't overdo it. You're eating for 2 now. Evelyn's head snapped around. How did you... Honey, I've had 4 babies. I know that look. Sarah smiled. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone if you're not ready, but you might want to start letting people know before they figure it out on their own. Evelyn watched Silas across the yard, directing the barn raising with quiet authority. Someone made a joke and he actually laughed. The sound carried across the yard like music. He's going to be a good father, Sarah said. He's terrified. Every first-time father is terrified. My husband nearly fainted when I told him about our first. She patted Evelyn's hand. But terror makes them try harder, makes them better. By evening, the barn was framed and half-roofed. People started packing up to head home, exhausted but satisfied. Marcus was the last to leave, stopping by the porch where Evelyn and Silas sat watching the sunset. Not bad for one day's work, he said. We can't thank you enough, Evelyn said. Don't thank me. Thank yourselves for being the kind of people worth helping. He tipped his hat. See you tomorrow. We'll finish the roof and start on the walls. After he left, Silas turned to Evelyn. I've never had this before. Had what? People. He gestured vaguely at the yard. Community. Folks who show up when you need them. My whole life, it's just been me against the world. It's not just you anymore. He pulled her close. She fit perfectly against his side, her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until full dark, watching their half-built barn become a shadow against the stars. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The barn went up fast with so many hands helping. By the end of September, it was done, bigger and stronger than the old one, with a proper hayloft and reinforced doors that would actually keep out the wind. The morning after they finished, Evelyn woke up to find Silas already gone. She found him in the new barn, just standing there looking at it. You all right? She asked. Just thinking. He ran his hand along one of the support beams. This whole building exists because people gave a damn. About us. About doing what's right. He shook his head. Don't know what to do with that. You could start by accepting it. I'm trying. He turned to face her. But every time something good happens, I keep waiting for the other boot to drop. Maybe there isn't another boot this time. There's always another boot, Evelyn. That's how life works. She wanted to argue, but 3 days later he was proven right. The letter came from a lawyer in Denver. Thick paper, official seal, the kind of document that never brought good news. Evelyn opened it at the kitchen table while Silas read over her shoulder. It was a lawsuit. Mercer was suing them for defamation, claiming they'd destroyed his reputation with false accusations about the barn fire. He was demanding $10,000 in damages. He can't do this, Evelyn said. He just did. Silas took the letter and read it again. Says we have 30 days to respond or he wins by default. We don't have $10,000. He knows that. That's the point. Silas crumpled the letter in his fist. He can't beat us directly, so he's trying to bankrupt us through the courts. What do we do? Find a lawyer, I guess. Fight it. They rode into Silver Creek that afternoon and found the only lawyer in town, a young man named Peter Walsh who'd only been practicing for 2 years. He read the lawsuit and whistled low. This is nasty, he said. Mercer's claiming you made public statements you knew to be false with intent to damage his business relationships. They weren't false, Evelyn said. His man admitted he was there. Everyone heard it. Recanted 2 days later, according to this. Walsh tapped the document. Says he was confused and frightened by the mob mentality. Now he swears Mercer never sent him anywhere. He's lying. Probably, but proving it in court is different from knowing it in your gut. Walsh leaned back in his chair. I'll be straight with you. I'm not good enough to win this case. You need someone from Denver, someone with experience in civil litigation. How much would that cost? Silas asked. More than you have, I'm guessing. Maybe 1,000, just as a retainer. Silence fell over the office. What if we don't fight it? Evelyn asked quietly. Then Mercer wins by default. You'd owe him $10,000 plus court costs. When you can't pay, he can seize your property to settle the debt. Walsh looked genuinely sorry. I'm sorry. I wish I had better news. They left the lawyer's office in a daze. Evelyn felt like the ground was tilting under her feet. Everything they'd built, everything they'd fought for, was about to be taken away by a piece of paper. There has to be something we can do, she said. Silas didn't answer. His jaw was set in that way that meant he was thinking hard and didn't like his conclusions. That night, he barely touched his dinner, just sat at the table, staring at nothing. Talk to me, Evelyn said. I could leave. She went cold. What? If I left, you could claim you had no knowledge of the statements I made. Say I was acting on my own. Distance yourself from it. He still wouldn't look at her. You could probably settle for less. Keep the ranch. Are you insane? I'm trying to protect you. By abandoning me? Evelyn stood up so fast her chair fell over. That's your solution? Run back to your mountain and leave me to deal with this alone? You'd have the ranch. I don't want the ranch without you, she was yelling now, months of stress and fear pouring out. Don't you understand that? This place means nothing if you're not here. He finally looked at her. His eyes were wet. I'm trying to save what I can. Then save us. Save our family. She grabbed his hand and pressed it against her belly. Save our child. Don't you dare give up now. They stood there, his hand on her stomach, and Evelyn felt the baby kick. Silas's eyes went wide. Was that? Yes. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her belly. The baby kicked again. Silas made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. We're not giving up, Evelyn said firmly. We're going to fight this, together. He looked up at her. How? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. The next morning, Evelyn rode back into town. She went door to door talking to everyone who'd been at the barn raising, asking them to write down what they'd heard that day, what Mercer's man had said, what they'd witnessed. Most people agreed. Some were reluctant, afraid of crossing Mercer. But by the end of the day, she had 17 written statements from townspeople who'd heard the confession. She brought them to Walsh. He read through them and shook his head. These help, but they're not enough. A good lawyer will tear these apart. People's memories are unreliable. They could have misheard, could have misunderstood. He set them down. What you need is evidence, something concrete that proves Mercer ordered the attack. Like what? Documents, letters, something in writing. Walsh shrugged apologetically. Without that, it's your word against his, and he's got more money and influence. Evelyn left feeling defeated. They didn't have documents or letters. They had nothing but their word and the word of people Mercer could intimidate into silence. She was halfway home when an idea hit her. She turned the horse around and rode to the livery stable where Tommy's father worked, found the boy mucking out stalls. Tommy, I need to ask you something. The kid looked up, nervous. I already told the sheriff what I saw, Mrs. Boone. I know, and I'm grateful, but I need you to think hard about that day. The man you saw riding away from our barn, are you absolutely certain it was Mercer's hired man? Yes, ma'am, I know that horse. It used to belong to Mr. Henderson before Mr. Mercer bought it. And you saw him riding away right before the fire started? Yes, ma'am. Maybe 5 minutes before. I remember because I was supposed to go home, but I stayed to see if there were any eggs in the chicken coop. 5 minutes. Evelyn's mind was racing. So he was there right when the fire would have been set. I guess so. Tommy, would you be willing to testify to that in court, even if it means standing up in front of a judge and lawyers and having them ask you questions? The boy paled. I don't know, ma'am. My pa says we shouldn't get involved in other folks' business. I understand, but sometimes doing the right thing means getting involved. She knelt down so she was at his eye level. You saved our lives that day by telling the truth. I'm asking you to do it again. He thought about it for a long moment, then nodded. I'll do it, but only if you promise my pa won't lose his job. I promise. She left feeling slightly better. It wasn't much, but it was something. Over the next 2 weeks, Evelyn and Silas prepared for court like they were preparing for battle. They gathered every piece of evidence they could find, every witness statement, every bit of testimony. Walsh helped them organize it into something resembling a defense. It's still not enough, he warned, but it's better than nothing. 3 days before the trial, Mercer made another move. Silas was working on fence repairs when 2 men approached on horseback. Evelyn recognized them, businessmen from Denver who sometimes did deals with the ranchers in the area. Mr. Boone, one of them called, we'd like to have a word. Silas set down his tools and walked over. About what? We represent a consortium of investors interested in acquiring property in this region. We understand you're facing some legal difficulties. Word travels fast. We'd like to make you an offer, $5,000, cash for your property. You walk away clean, no lawsuit, no debt. Silas looked at them for a long moment. You work for Mercer. We represent independent interests. You work for Mercer, Silas repeated, and the answer's no. Mr. Boone, be reasonable. You're going to lose in court. When that happens, you'll lose everything and get nothing. This way, at least you walk away with something. I walk away with nothing that matters. He turned back to his work. Get off my land. They left, but Evelyn could see the worry in Silas's eyes that night. Maybe we should have taken it, he said. No. 5,000 would be enough to start somewhere else. Raise the baby without all this hanging over us. And spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. Evelyn took his face in her hands. We fight. No matter what happens, at least we'll know we fought. The trial started on a cold October morning. The courthouse in Silver Creek was packed, Seemed like the whole town had shown up to watch. Mercer sat at the plaintiff's table looking confident and well-dressed. His lawyer was a slick man from Denver in an expensive suit. Evelyn and Silas sat at the defendant's table with Walsh, who looked like he was about to be sick. "Remember," Walsh whispered. "Let me do the talking. Don't lose your temper. Don't volunteer information." The judge, a stern man named Morrison, who'd been on the bench for 20 years, called the court to order. Mercer's lawyer stood up and painted a picture of a respected businessman whose reputation had been destroyed by vicious lies. He called witnesses who testified that Mercer was a pillar of the community, a generous employer, a man who'd never been accused of wrongdoing before these vindictive newcomers started their campaign of slander. It was all very polished and convincing. Then Walsh stood up for the defense. He was nervous. His voice shook at first, but as he got going, he found his rhythm. He called witnesses who testified about the harassment, the cut fences, the poisoned cattle, the pattern of intimidation that had been going on for months. Then he called Tommy to the stand. The boy was terrified. His voice was barely above a whisper as he described seeing Mercer's hired man riding away from the barn minutes before the fire started. Mercer's lawyer tore into him during cross-examination. "You're 12 years old, is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you were how far away when you allegedly saw this man?" "Maybe, 50 yards?" 50 yards. "And you're certain you could identify the horse from that distance?" "Yes, sir. It has a white blaze." "Many horses have white markings. What makes you so certain this was the specific horse belonging to Mr. Mercer's employee?" Tommy's face crumpled. "I just know. I saw it." "You saw a horse. You assumed it belonged to someone associated with Mr. Mercer. Isn't it possible you were mistaken?" "I don't think so. But you don't know for certain. You could be wrong." "I guess," the lawyer smiled. No further questions. Tommy left the stand in tears. Evelyn wanted to strangle Mercer's lawyer. The trial went on for 2 more days. More witnesses, more testimony, more legal arguments that went over Evelyn's head. Through it all, Mercer sat there looking calm and righteous. On the final day, Walsh called Silas to the stand. "Mr. Boone, in your own words, please tell the court why you believe Mr. Mercer was responsible for the fire." Silas took a breath. "Because he told us something would happen if we didn't sell. Because his men had been harassing us for months. Because he had motive and opportunity and objection," Mercer's lawyer said smoothly. "Speculation." "Sustained," the judge said. "Mr. Boone, please stick to facts you personally witnessed." Silas clenched his jaw. "The facts are that Mercer wanted our land. We wouldn't sell. Then our barn mysteriously caught fire. Can you prove Mr. Mercer personally ordered this fire?" "No, but can you prove anyone working for Mr. Mercer set the fire?" Tommy saw. "Can you personally prove it?" Silas was silent. "No further questions," Mercer's lawyer said. During closing arguments, Mercer's lawyer was brilliant. He talked about the sacred importance of reputation, about how dangerous it was to let people make accusations without proof, about how this case would set a precedent for whether honest businessmen could be slandered with impunity. Walsh did his best, talked about patterns of behavior, about protecting the little guy from powerful interests. But even Evelyn could tell it wasn't enough. The judge took 30 minutes to deliberate. When he came back, his face was unreadable. "I've reviewed the evidence and testimony presented in this case. While I find the defendant's claims compelling, they have failed to provide concrete proof that Mr. Mercer was directly responsible for the barn fire or that their public statements were made with proper foundation." "Tisroshim bachi shakas," he paused. "However, I also find that the defendants acted in good faith based on the information available to them. Therefore, I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff, but awarding only $1,000 in damages plus court costs." "What is EEGs?" Evelyn's heart sank. $1,000 might as well have been $10,000. They didn't have it. "Your Honor," Walsh said quickly, "my clients request 60 days to pay the judgment." 30 days, the judge said. "After that, Mr. Mercer may pursue collection through whatever legal means necessary." The gavel came down. They'd lost. Outside the courthouse, people avoided their eyes. A few offered sympathetic words. Most just hurried past, not wanting to be associated with losers. Evelyn and Silas walked to the wagon in silence. "We could sell some cattle," Evelyn said finally. "Between that and what we have saved, won't be enough, not for 1,000 plus court costs." Silas helped her into the wagon. "He's going to take the ranch." "No." "Evelyn, no." She turned to face him. "We still have 30 days. We'll figure something out." But as they rode home, she had no idea what that something could be. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to Silas's breathing, her mind spinning through possibilities. They could sell everything and try to negotiate a settlement. They could borrow money, though who would lend to them? They could run, though that meant abandoning everything. Every option led to the same place, losing the ranch. Around midnight, she gave up trying to sleep and went to the kitchen, made tea, sat at the table staring at nothing. That's where Silas found her an hour later. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Keep trying to think of a way out. Keep coming up empty." He sat down across from her. "There might be one option we haven't considered." "What?" "We could talk to Mercer directly, try to negotiate. He'll just demand we sell for pennies on the dollar." "Maybe. Or maybe he'd accept partial payment now and installments over time." Silas ran his hands through his hair. "I hate the idea of giving him anything, but if it keeps us from losing everything—" Evelyn thought about it. Every cell in her body rebelled against the idea of negotiating with Mercer. But they were out of options. "All right," she said. "We'll try." The next morning, they rode to Mercer's ranch. It was massive, easily 5 times the size of theirs, with a fancy house that looked more like something from back east than frontier Colorado. A servant answered the door and made them wait in a parlor that probably cost more than their entire property. Mercer kept them waiting for 20 minutes. When he finally appeared, he looked smug. "Mr. and Mrs. Boone, to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "We want to discuss payment," Silas said, "for the judgment." "Ah, yes, $1,000 plus $600 in court costs. Quite a sum for simple ranchers." "We can pay $300 now," Evelyn said. "The rest in installments over 6 months." Mercer laughed. "My dear, this isn't a negotiation. You owe me $1,600. I expect payment in full within 30 days, as the judge ordered." "We don't have that much." "Then you'll lose your ranch, which, coincidentally, I'm still willing to purchase, though my offer is now considerably lower than it was before. Shall we say $2,000 for the whole property?" Evelyn felt rage building in her chest. "That land is worth 10 times that." "Not anymore. Not with a judgment against it. Not with your reputation in tatters." He smiled. $2,000. Cash. You sign over the deed and walk away. Otherwise, I'll take it all, and you'll get nothing." Silas stood up. "We're done here. Think about it, Mr. Boone. You have 28 days left. After that, the decision gets made for you." They left feeling worse than when they'd arrived. On the ride home, neither of them spoke. What was there to say? They'd tried everything and failed at everything. But when they reached the ranch, there were horses tied up outside. A lot of them. Evelyn and Silas exchanged confused looks and headed inside. The kitchen was packed. Marcus was there. Sarah Mitchell. Henderson. Tommy's father. The Mitchell brothers. Walsh. Even some of the men who'd helped rebuild the barn, at least 20 people crammed into their small house. "What's going on?" Evelyn asked. Marcus stepped forward. "We heard about the judgment. We're here to help." "We appreciate that, but we took up a collection." He pulled out a canvas bag and set it on the table. "Folks in town contributed what they could. It's not much, but it's a start." Evelyn opened the bag. There had to be at least $300 inside. "We can't take this," she whispered. "Yes, you can," Sarah said. "You've helped half the people in this room at one point or another. Now we're helping you." "It's still not enough," Silas said quietly. "We appreciate it more than you know, but we'd still be 1,000 short." "Which is why we have another idea," Henderson said. He pulled out a piece of paper. "This is a petition. Every person in this room has signed it. We're asking the judge to reconsider the damage amount, arguing that it's excessive given the circumstances." "Will that work?" Evelyn asked Walsh. "Maybe. It's worth trying." Walsh looked more hopeful than he had in days. "Morrison's a fair man. If he sees the community supports you, he might reduce the judgment." "And if he doesn't?" Silas asked. Nobody had an answer for that. The next day, Walsh filed the petition. 3 days later, they got a response. The judge would hear arguments in 1 week. That week felt like the longest of Evelyn's life. She and Silas went through the motions of ranch work, but their hearts weren't in it. The baby was getting bigger. She was 5 months along now and couldn't hide it anymore. People had started congratulating her, which felt surreal given everything else happening. The morning of the hearing, Evelyn woke up feeling sick. Not morning sickness, just pure anxiety. "What if he says no?" she asked Silas as they got dressed. "Then we deal with it." "How?" He pulled her close. "I don't know. But we'll find a way. We always do." The courthouse was even more packed than before. It seemed like every person who'd signed the petition showed up. They filled the gallery, standing room only. The judge looked surprised when he walked in and saw the crowd. Walsh presented the petition and made his argument. The damages were punitive, not compensatory. The Boones had acted in good faith. The community supported them. Surely a reduced judgment was more appropriate. Mercer's lawyer argued that the judgment was fair and the court shouldn't bow to mob pressure. The judge listened to both sides. Then he did something unexpected. "Mr. Mercer, please stand." Mercer stood, looking confused. "I've been on this bench for 20 years, the judge said. I've seen a lot of cases. Most of them are pretty straightforward, but this one has bothered me since the moment I ruled on it." "Your Honor, I'm not finished." Morrison's voice was sharp. "The law says the Boones didn't prove their case, and legally, that's true. But sitting up here watching this trial, I couldn't shake the feeling that justice and the law weren't quite aligned." The courtroom went silent. "I've also been hearing things since the trial ended, about your business practices, Mr. Mercer, about other people you've pressured to sell, about methods you've used that, while perhaps not illegal, certainly aren't ethical." He leaned forward. "So here's what I'm going to do. I'm reducing the judgment to $500. The Boones have 30 days to pay. After that, this matter is closed." Mercer went red. "Your Honor, that's outrageous." "That's my ruling. If you don't like it, you can appeal to the territorial court, but I suspect they'll uphold my decision." Morrison looked at Evelyn and Silas. $500, 30 days. Don't make me regret this." The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Evelyn couldn't breathe. $500. They could pay that. Between their savings and the collection, they could actually pay that. They'd won. People crowded around, congratulating them, slapping Silas on the back. Marcus was grinning. Sarah was crying. Even Walsh looked stunned. Across the courtroom, Mercer stood alone, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. He looked at Evelyn and Silas with pure hatred. Then he turned and walked out. Evelyn should have felt relieved, should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt a chill run down her spine, because she knew Mercer, and she knew men like him didn't lose gracefully. This wasn't over, but in the days following the court victory, nothing happened. No attacks, no threats, no sign of Mercer at all. Silas didn't trust it. "He's planning something," he said one evening as they sat on the porch. November had arrived with the first real cold, and Evelyn was wrapped in a heavy shawl, her belly noticeably round now at 6 months. "Maybe he finally gave up," she said, though she didn't believe it either. Men like Mercer don't give up. They just change tactics. He was right to be worried. 2 weeks after the hearing, Marcus came riding out to the ranch looking grim. "Mercer's leaving," he announced. Evelyn looked up from mending a shirt. "Leaving where?" "Colorado. Selling his ranch, liquidating his holdings. Says he's moving to California to pursue other opportunities." Silas frowned. "Just like that? After everything?" "That's what folks are saying. He's already got buyers lined up. Should be gone by the end of the month." After Marcus left, Evelyn turned to Silas. "You don't look relieved." "Because I'm not. This feels wrong." He paced the kitchen. "He spent months trying to get this land, nearly bankrupted us in court, and now he's just walking away? Doesn't make sense." Maybe losing in court was the final straw. Maybe he realized we weren't going to break. Maybe. But Silas didn't sound convinced. The next week proved him right. It started with small things. Supplies they'd ordered from Denver never arrived. The bank suddenly needed additional documentation for a small loan they'd been approved for. A buyer who'd agreed to purchase some of their cattle backed out at the last minute without explanation. Nothing catastrophic, just inconvenient, suspicious. Then Henderson rode down from the trading post with news that made Evelyn's blood run cold. Mercer's been buying up debts, he said. Every note, every loan, every outstanding account in the territory. He's been quiet about it, using intermediaries, but word's getting around. Why would he do that? Evelyn asked. Control. He owns your debt. He owns you. Can call it in whenever he wants, force you into bankruptcy. Henderson looked uncomfortable. I got approached last week. Someone wanted to buy the credit I've extended to you folks. I told them to go to hell. How much do we owe you? Silas asked quietly. Maybe $70, but that's not the point. The point is Mercer's building a trap, and once he's got enough debts collected, he'll spring it. After Henderson left, Evelyn pulled out their ledger and went through every account. They owed money to the feed store, the blacksmith, the doctor for visits when Silas burned his hands during the fire. Small amounts, but they added up. Maybe $300 total. If Mercer bought all of it and demanded immediate payment, they'd be in trouble. We need to pay everything off, she said, now, before he can buy the debts. They spent the next 2 days settling every outstanding account they had. It nearly wiped out their savings, but at least Mercer couldn't use it against them, except they'd forgotten one thing. The letter came 3 days later, from a bank in Denver, informing them that their mortgage, the loan Thomas had taken out years ago to buy the ranch, had been sold to a private investor. Payment in full was due in 30 days. The amount? $8,000. Evelyn read the letter 3 times, certain she was misunderstanding, but the words didn't change. We can't pay this, she whispered. Silas took the letter. His face went gray. This has to be illegal. You can't just call in a mortgage like this. Apparently you can if you buy it from the bank. Evelyn felt like the floor was tilting. Thomas structured this as a 10-year note. We've been making payments. We're not in default. Doesn't matter. Says right here the new owner has the right to demand payment in full at any time. Silas crumpled the paper. It's Mercer. Has to be. They rode into town that afternoon and went straight to Walsh's office. He read the letter and shook his head. This is legal. Barely, but legal. Banks can sell mortgages, and if the terms allow the new holder to call the note, there's nothing you can do. There has to be something, Evelyn said desperately. Some loophole, some... There isn't. I'm sorry. Walsh looked genuinely pained. You have 2 options. Pay the $8,000 in 30 days or lose the ranch. We don't have $8,000. Then you need to borrow it. Or sell. They left Walsh's office in a fog. Evelyn couldn't think straight. $8,000. They'd need to sell every cow, every horse, every piece of equipment they owned, and it still wouldn't be enough. We could go to other banks, Silas said. Try to get a new loan to pay off this one. Who's going to lend us $8,000? We've got no collateral except the ranch, and the ranch is already mortgaged. Then we sell some of the land, keep the house and a few acres, start smaller. To who? Nobody around here has that kind of money except... She stopped, looked at Silas. They both knew. Mercer was the only buyer. That night, Evelyn lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Silas paced. The baby was moving constantly now, rolling and kicking like it was running out of room. She put her hand on her belly and felt tears sliding down her face. I can't bring a baby into nothing, she whispered. Silas stopped pacing, came to the bed and sat down. You're not bringing them into nothing. You're bringing them into a family. A homeless family. We'll figure something out. How? We've tried everything. We've fought and scraped and bled for this place, and it's still not enough. She turned to look at him. Maybe we should just sell to Mercer. Take whatever he offers and start somewhere else. You don't mean that, don't I? At least we'd have something. At least our child would have a roof over their head. Silas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Remember what you told me when we first met? That you'd rather marry a stranger than give Mercer the satisfaction? That was before I knew what it would cost. The cost hasn't changed, only our understanding of it. He took her hand. If we sell to him now, after everything, what are we teaching our child? That you give up when things get hard? That bullies win if they just push hard enough? I'm tired of fighting. I know, so am I. He pressed his forehead against hers. But we can't stop now. Not when we're this close. Close to what? Losing everything? Close to winning. Really winning. He pulled back to look at her. Mercer's desperate. That's why he's using these tactics. He knows he can't beat us straight up anymore. So he's trying to beat us through paperwork and money, but there's one thing he didn't count on. What's that? We're not alone anymore. The next morning, Silas called a meeting at the ranch. Marcus came. Henderson, the Mitchell brothers, Sarah and her husband, Tommy's father, Walsh, even some ranchers from the outlying areas who'd heard what was happening. Silas explained the situation. The called mortgage, the 30-day deadline, the impossible amount. When he finished, there was silence. Then Marcus stood up. How much do you need? $8,000. Someone whistled. That's a lot of money. I know. And I'm not asking for a handout. Silas looked around the room. But if folks could lend us what they can, with interest, proper terms, everything legal, maybe we could cobble together enough to pay off the mortgage. Then we'd owe a bunch of you instead of the bank, but at least we'd have time to pay it back. How much time? One of the ranchers asked. 5 years. We'd pay back every penny with interest over 5 years. The ranchers looked at each other, started doing math in their heads. I could do 500, Henderson said, at 5% interest. I've got maybe 200 I could spare, Marcus said. One by one, people started offering amounts. 300 here, 100 there, $50 from someone who didn't have much but wanted to help anyway. By the time they finished tallying, they had commitments for $5,000. It wasn't enough. The room went quiet. $5,000 was an enormous amount, more than Evelyn had dared hope for, but it was still $3,000 short. We could sell some of the herd, Silas said, use that to make up the difference. Not this time of year, one of the ranchers said. Prices are down. You'd get maybe half what they're worth. Then we sell equipment, the wagon, whatever we need to. And how will you work the ranch with no equipment? Another man asked. They were stuck, so close but not close enough. Then a voice spoke from the doorway. I can cover the rest. Everyone turned. A man stood there, maybe 60 years old, wearing expensive clothes but looking uncomfortable in them. Evelyn didn't recognize him. Who are you? Silas asked. Name's William Porter. I own the bank in Silver Creek. He stepped inside. I heard about your situation, heard about what Mercer's been doing, and I've got a proposition for you. We're listening, Evelyn said cautiously. I'll loan you $3,000, 10-year term, reasonable interest. But there's a condition. He paused. I want you to go public with this. Tell everyone what Mercer did, how he manipulated the system to destroy you, because he's done it before, to other people, and he'll keep doing it unless someone stops him. I thought you said he was leaving for California, Silas said. He is, but his methods aren't. There are other men like him doing the same things. If your story gets out, if people understand how these schemes work, maybe it'll be harder for the next Mercer to get away with it. Porter looked around the room. What happened to you isn't just your fight. It's everybody's fight. And I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by men with money and no conscience. Evelyn felt something stir in her chest. You want us to testify against him? Take him to court again? Not court. The newspapers. I've got contacts in Denver. Papers that would run your story. Make sure everyone knows what happened here. Porter smiled slightly. Hit him where it really hurts, his reputation. He'll sue us again, Walsh warned. Let him try. This time you'll have the bank's lawyers backing you, and documentation, and me as a witness to how he bought that mortgage specifically to call it in. Porter's eyes hardened. I sold him that mortgage. Didn't know what he planned to do with it at the time, but I know now, and I'm not letting it stand. Silas looked at Evelyn. She could see the question in his eyes. Do we do this? She thought about the baby growing inside her, about the ranch they'd fought so hard to keep, about all the other families out there who might face the same thing. We do it, she said. 2 days later, a reporter from the Denver Tribune arrived at the ranch. Spent 3 hours interviewing Evelyn and Silas. Took notes on everything, the harassment, the fire, the lawsuits, the bought debts and called mortgage. The story ran a week later. Front page. Complete with quotes from Porter about Mercer's tactics and testimony from other people Mercer had driven out over the years. The response was immediate. Letters poured in from all over the territory. People sharing their own stories of being bullied by men with money. Lawmakers talking about reforming banking practices. Other newspapers picking up the story and running their own investigations. Mercer's planned move to California suddenly looked less like a business opportunity and more like running from scandal. But the real victory came 2 weeks later. Porter walked into the ranch with a paper in his hand and a smile on his face. Mercer's selling the mortgage back to the bank, at a loss. He set the paper on the table. You're back to your original terms. 10-year note, monthly payments, everything back to normal. Evelyn couldn't speak. He's cutting his losses, Porter continued. The publicity made it toxic. Nobody wants to be associated with him now, so he's liquidating everything and disappearing. You won. We won, Evelyn repeated. The words felt strange in her mouth. You won, Porter confirmed. The ranch is yours, free and clear of Mercer's interference. After Porter left, Evelyn and Silas stood in the kitchen in stunned silence. It's over, Silas said finally. It's over, Evelyn agreed. Then they both started laughing, not because anything was funny, just because they'd survived. Against every odd, every threat, every scheme, they'd survived. That night, they celebrated with Marcus and Henderson and Sarah and everyone who'd helped them. Someone brought whiskey, someone else brought a fiddle. For the first time in months, the ranch was filled with music and laughter instead of fear. Evelyn sat on the porch watching, her hand on her belly. The baby was quiet now, maybe sleeping, or maybe just listening to the sounds of joy. Silas came out and sat beside her. You all right? Better than all right. She leaned against him. We did it. We did. He kissed the top of her head. Couldn't have done it without you. We couldn't have done it without each other, or them. She gestured at the people inside. We tried to do everything alone at first, fight our own battles, keep our problems to ourselves. Mountain man habits, hard to break. Well, you're not a mountain man anymore. You're a rancher, a husband, about to be a father. She took his hand and placed it on her belly. And you've got a whole community behind you. The baby kicked against his palm. He smiled. Still scares me sometimes, he admitted. Having people depend on me. Having people I depend on. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. They sat there as the sun set, painting the mountains gold and red. The same mountains where Silas had lived alone for 10 years, where he'd expected to die alone. You ever miss it? Evelyn asked. The solitude? The simple life? Sometimes, when things get hard and people get complicated. He was quiet for a moment. But then I remember what that life cost me. What I was giving up without even knowing it. What was that? This. You, them. He gestured at everything, the ranch, the people inside, the mountains beyond. Being part of something bigger than myself. Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. Damn hormones made her cry at everything lately. The party went late. People didn't leave until well after midnight, stumbling home happy and drunk and satisfied. Marcus was the last to go, shaking Silas's hand and hugging Evelyn carefully. You two are going to be fine, he said. Better than fine. You're going to build something that lasts. After everyone left, Evelyn and Silas cleaned up the mess. It was companionable work, moving around each other in the small kitchen like they'd been doing it for decades instead of months. I keep thinking about what Porter said, Evelyn said as she washed dishes. About our story helping other people. What about it? Makes me wonder if that's the real legacy. Not the ranch, not the money, but showing people that you can fight back, that you don't have to let the powerful crush you. Heavy thoughts for midnight. Pregnant woman thoughts. Everything feels significant. She dried her hands and turned to face him. Do you think our child will understand what we went through for this place? Probably not. Not until they're older and facing their own fights. He pulled her close, careful of her belly. But they'll grow up knowing they're loved. And they'll grow up knowing their parents didn't give up when things got hard. That's worth something. Worth everything, Evelyn corrected. They went to bed exhausted and happy. For the first time in months, Evelyn slept through the night without nightmares of losing everything. The rest of November passed peacefully. Silas threw himself into preparing for winter, cutting firewood, insulating the barn, making sure everything was secure before the heavy snow arrived. Evelyn worked on getting the house ready for the baby, which was harder than she'd expected given how tired she got these days. Sarah came out twice a week to help and to share advice about childbirth and babies. Evelyn was grateful for it. She'd lost her first pregnancy with Thomas and barely knew what to expect this time. Every baby's different, Sarah assured her. And every birth is different. Just trust your body. It knows what to do. My body feels like it doesn't know anything except how to be uncomfortable. Sarah laughed. Wait until month 8. You think you're uncomfortable now. In early December, the first real snow hit. Silas woke Evelyn before dawn to show her the world transformed into a white silence. Everything was beautiful and pristine and impossibly quiet. This is what the mountains were like, he said softly. In winter. Just me and the snow and nothing for miles. Do you miss it? Not even a little bit. They stood at the window watching snow fall until Evelyn's back started aching and she had to sit down. You all right? Silas asked immediately. Fine. Just the baby pressing on everything. She shifted, trying to find a comfortable position. I don't know how I'm going to make it another 3 months like this. One day at a time. Easy for you to say. You're not the one carrying a tiny person who likes to kick your ribs. He knelt beside her chair and put his ear to her belly. The baby kicked obligingly. Sorry, he said to her stomach. Didn't know you were causing trouble in there. Despite the discomfort, Evelyn smiled. Silas talked to her belly every night now, telling the baby about the ranch and the mountains and all the things they'd do together. It was the sweetest thing she'd ever seen. Christmas approached. They didn't have money for much, but Marcus organized another community gathering at the ranch. People brought food and small gifts. Someone carved a wooden rattle for the baby. Sarah made tiny clothes. Henderson brought a cradle he'd built himself. Evelyn was overwhelmed by the generosity. These people who'd started as strangers had become family. On Christmas night, after everyone left, she and Silas sat by the fire. Evelyn was exhausted, but happy. This is the best Christmas I've had in years, she said. Better than with Thomas? She thought about how to answer that. Different. Thomas and I had quiet Christmases, just the two of us. This is fuller, louder. She looked at Silas. Both were good, just different kinds of good. He understood. Didn't get jealous or insecure about her first husband, just accepted that she'd had a life before him, and that love didn't erase love. Next Christmas, we'll have the baby, he said. If we survive the birth. We will. You can't know that. I know you. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You'll be fine. Evelyn wished she had his confidence. She'd heard too many stories of women dying in childbirth, of babies that didn't make it, of all the things that could go wrong. But she didn't say any of that, just leaned against Silas and watched the fire and tried not to think about March. January arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow. Silas spent most of his time keeping the animals fed and the paths clear. Evelyn spent most of her time being enormous and uncomfortable and desperately ready for this pregnancy to be over. She was 7 months along now and felt like she was carrying a boulder. Her back hurt constantly. Her feet were swollen. She couldn't sleep because the baby was always moving. I'm never doing this again, she announced one morning after a particularly rough night. Silas smiled. You say that now. I mean it. 1 child. That's it. We'll see. She threw a pillow at him. Despite the discomfort, there were good moments. Feeling the baby move, watching Silas's face light up every time he felt a kick, making plans for the nursery and arguing about names. If it's a boy, I like Ethan, Evelyn said. What about if it's a girl? Haven't decided, maybe Rose or Catherine. Those are nice, he paused. What about Evelyn? Absolutely not. I'm not naming my daughter after myself. Why not? It's a good name. It's an old lady name. Our daughter deserves something fresh, something that's hers. They went back and forth like this for hours, never deciding anything but enjoying the debate. February brought a thaw. The snow melted enough that people could travel again. Sarah came out to check on Evelyn and declared everything looked good. Baby's positioned right, heartbeat strong. You should go into labor sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks. That's a wide range. Babies come when they're ready, can't rush them. Evelyn spent the last weeks of February preparing obsessively, washing tiny clothes, organizing supplies, making sure everything was ready because if she stopped moving, she'd start thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Silas watched her with worried eyes but didn't try to stop her, just made sure she ate and rested when she'd let him. March arrived with a late storm that dropped 2 feet of snow in one night. Evelyn woke up to contractions. "Silas!" She shook him awake. "It's time." He was up instantly, pulling on clothes. "How far apart?" "Maybe 10 minutes? I'm not sure. They just started. I'll get Sarah." "You can't ride in this storm. I'll walk if I have to." He was already heading for the door. "You stay here. Don't do anything. I'll be back as fast as I can." He disappeared into the storm. Evelyn stood in the empty house, breathing through another contraction, and felt fear settle in her gut. This was happening. Ready or not, the baby was coming. She tried to stay calm, timed the contractions like Sarah had taught her. They were getting closer together, stronger. Silas came back an hour later with Sarah and her husband. Both were covered in snow, but moving quickly. Sarah took one look at Evelyn and started issuing orders. "Boil water, get clean towels, help her to the bed." The next several hours blurred together. Pain, exhaustion, Sarah's calm voice telling her what to do. Silas holding her hand, looking terrified but trying to hide it. "You're doing great," he kept saying. "You're a liar," she gasped between contractions. He smiled despite the worry in his eyes. "Maybe, but you're still doing great." The labor lasted through the afternoon and into the evening. Evelyn lost track of time. There was just pain and pushing and Sarah saying, "Almost there, almost there." Then, just after sunset, a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a boy," Sarah announced, holding up a tiny, squalling infant. Evelyn collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and relieved and overwhelmed. Sarah cleaned the baby quickly and placed him on Evelyn's chest. He was tiny, red-faced, perfect. "Ethan," Evelyn whispered. "His name is Ethan." Silas stood beside the bed, staring at his son with an expression of absolute wonder. When Sarah offered to let him hold the baby, he looked terrified. "I might drop him." "You won't drop him," Sarah said firmly. "Sit down first if you're worried." He sat. Sarah placed Ethan in his arms. The baby was so small against Silas's broad chest that Evelyn almost laughed. Silas looked at his son, then at Evelyn. His eyes were wet. "We have a son," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We have a son," Evelyn confirmed. Sarah and her husband left after making sure both Evelyn and the baby were stable. Promised to check in tomorrow. Left them alone with their new family. Evelyn watched Silas rock Ethan, humming softly. The same man who'd lived alone in the mountains, who'd expected to die alone, was now singing to his infant son. "You're a natural," she said. "I'm terrified." "That's part of being a natural." She smiled. "Come here." He carefully laid down beside her, Ethan between them. The baby had stopped crying and was just looking around with unfocused eyes. "He looks like you," Silas said. "He looks like a baby. A baby who looks like you." They lay there, the three of them, and watched the storm outside. Safe, warm, together. Everything they'd fought for had led to this moment. This tiny person who didn't know about mortgages or lawsuits or men like Mercer, who just knew he was loved and safe. "Thank you," Silas whispered. "For what?" "For choosing me. Out of all those letters, you chose the broken mountain man. You weren't broken, just alone." She touched his face. "And you're not alone anymore." "No," he agreed, looking at their son. "I'm not." The first few weeks with Ethan were harder than Evelyn had imagined. The baby cried constantly, slept in unpredictable bursts, and seemed to need feeding every hour. She was exhausted in a way that made the ranch work look easy by comparison. Silas tried to help but felt useless most of the time. He could change diapers and rock the baby, but he couldn't nurse, couldn't soothe Ethan the way Evelyn could. So he took over everything else, cooking, cleaning, managing the ranch, while Evelyn focused on keeping their son alive. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," she said one night after Ethan had been screaming for 2 hours straight. "He won't stop crying." "Maybe he's just got strong lungs," Silas offered. "That's not helpful." "I know. I'm sorry." He took the baby from her. "Go sleep. I'll walk with him." "You need sleep too. I'll sleep when he does. Go." She was too tired to argue. She collapsed into bed and was asleep in seconds. When she woke 4 hours later, she found Silas asleep in the rocking chair with Ethan on his chest, both of them snoring softly. The sight made her chest ache in a good way. By the time Ethan was 2 months old, they'd settled into a rhythm. Not a smooth one, but functional. Sarah came by weekly to check on them and reassure Evelyn that everything was normal, that all babies were difficult, that she was doing fine. "You sure?" Evelyn asked, bouncing a fussy Ethan. "Because I feel like I'm drowning." "You are drowning. Every new mother drowns a little bit." Sarah smiled. "But you haven't gone under yet. That's what matters." Spring arrived properly in April, bringing warmth and new grass and relief from the brutal winter. Silas started working the ranch harder, preparing for the summer season. They had loans to pay back, $5,000 to various townspeople, $3,000 to Porter's bank, $8,000 total, spread over 5 years. It was manageable. Barely, but manageable. One evening in May, Marcus rode out with news. "Mercer's gone. Left Colorado last week. Heard he's in San Francisco now, trying to start over." "Good riddance," Evelyn said. "There's more. Some of the families he forced out, they're coming back. Buying land. Rebuilding." Marcus smiled. "You two started something. People aren't afraid anymore." After Marcus left, Silas turned to Evelyn. "We started something?" "Apparently." She was nursing Ethan, who was finally calm for once. "Strange to think our fight became everyone's fight." "Not so strange. People were waiting for someone to stand up first. We just happened to be stubborn enough to do it." Summer brought growth. The cattle herd expanded. The ranch prospered. Silas hired a young ranch hand named Jack to help with the heavy work, which meant he could spend more time with Ethan. Watching him with their son never got old for Evelyn. This massive, scarred man who'd lived alone for a decade was completely undone by a 6-month-old baby. Ethan would smile, and Silas would melt. The baby would grab his finger, and Silas would carry him around the ranch for hours, explaining everything like Ethan could understand. "You're going to spoil him," Evelyn warned. "Good. He should be spoiled." "That's not how you raise a strong child." "Sure it is. You make them feel loved first. Then you teach them to be strong." Silas kissed the top of Ethan's head. "Can't be brave if you don't feel safe." Evelyn couldn't argue with that logic, mainly because she was guilty of the same thing. Ethan was spoiled rotten by both of them. In August, Sarah came by with news of her own. "I'm pregnant again. Number 5. "5? Evelyn couldn't imagine. "How do you manage?" "Poorly, but with lots of help." Sarah looked at Ethan, who was crawling now and getting into everything. "You thinking about having another?" "Eventually, maybe. Ask me again in a year when I've slept more than 3 hours at a time." But the truth was, despite the exhaustion and chaos, Evelyn was happy. Happier than she'd been in years. The ranch was stable, the debts were being paid down. Ethan was healthy and growing, and every night she fell asleep next to a man who loved her completely. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was theirs. Fall arrived with crisp air and changing leaves. Ethan turned one in early March, though they celebrated in September because nobody could remember the exact date anymore. Time had a way of blurring when you were exhausted. They had a small party. The usual people came: Marcus, Sarah's family, Henderson, the Mitchell brothers. Everyone brought gifts for Ethan, who was more interested in the wrapping paper than the presents. "He's got your stubbornness," Marcus told Silas, "and Evelyn's brains, hopefully." "Definitely her brains, no offense." Silas laughed. "None taken." That winter was easier than the previous one. They had more supplies, better preparation, and a routine that actually worked. Ethan was walking now, getting into everything, driving them both crazy in the best way. "He's fearless," Silas said one evening after pulling Ethan away from the fireplace for the 3rd time. "Doesn't understand danger. He's one. They don't understand anything except I want that. Reminds me of someone." Silas looked at her pointedly. "I understood danger. I just chose to ignore it. Like I said, reminds me of someone." The years started to blend together after that. Good years mostly. Hard work, but rewarding. The ranch grew steadily. They paid off Henderson first, then the Mitchell brothers, then Marcus. Each debt settled felt like a weight lifting. By the time Ethan was 3, they'd paid back everyone except Porter's bank. And Porter had restructured that loan to give them more time, claiming he believed in supporting successful ranchers. "Successful?" Evelyn repeated, testing the word. "Are we successful?" Silas looked around the ranch, the rebuilt barn, the expanded herd, the house they'd added 2 rooms to, The stable where 4 horses now lived instead of 2. "I think we might be," he said, sounding surprised. Success brought new challenges. Other ranchers started asking Silas for advice. People wanted to know how they'd survived Mercer, how they'd built something from nothing. Silas hated the attention. Evelyn found it amusing. "You're a legend now," she teased. "The mountain man who saved his ranch." "I didn't save anything. We did. Together." Try telling them that. But he did tell them that. Every time someone asked, he made sure to credit Evelyn. Made sure people understood it wasn't just him. It was both of them, working together, refusing to quit. Some people listened. Most just wanted the simple story of the tough mountain man who beat the rich villain. "Let them have their story," Evelyn said. "We know the truth." When Ethan was 4, Evelyn got pregnant again. It was unexpected but welcome. This pregnancy was easier than the first. She knew what to expect, wasn't terrified constantly, had help from Sarah and the other women in town. Their daughter was born in December, right in the middle of a blizzard. They named her Clara, after Evelyn's mother. Silas was better with Clara from the start, more confident, less afraid of breaking her. He'd learned from Ethan that babies were tougher than they looked. "She's got your eyes," he said, holding her tiny hand. "She's 2 days old. You can't tell whose eyes she has." "I can tell." Ethan was fascinated by his baby sister, wanted to hold her constantly, help feed her, show her his toys even though she couldn't see them yet. "Gentle," Evelyn reminded him for the 100th time. "She's very small." "I know, Mama. I'm being gentle." He was. Despite being 4 and generally destructive, Ethan was incredibly careful with Clara. It made Evelyn's heart hurt in the best way. The ranch continued to grow. By the time Clara was 2 and Ethan was 6, they had the largest cattle operation in the region. Silas hired 2 more hands, built a second barn, expanded their grazing land. They were prosperous. Actually, genuinely prosperous. "Thomas would be proud," Evelyn said one evening as they watched the sunset from the porch. Both children were finally asleep inside. "You think so?" "I know so. He always wanted this place to succeed, to be something real." She leaned against Silas. "He just didn't live long enough to see it. I'm sorry you lost him. So am I, but I'm not sorry I found you." She turned to look at him. "Does that make me a terrible person?" "Makes you human. You can miss what you lost and be grateful for what you have. Both things can be true." That was something Evelyn had learned over the years. Life wasn't simple. Love wasn't simple. You could love 2 people differently and completely. You could grieve one husband while building a life with another. The heart was bigger than people gave it credit for. When Ethan was 8 and Clara was 4, they started talking about more children. But after 2 miscarriages in 2 years, they decided to stop trying. "2 is enough," Evelyn said after the second loss. 2 healthy children is more than many people get. Silas agreed, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. He'd wanted a big family, wanted to fill the house with noise and chaos and love. But 2 would have to be enough. The children grew. Ethan became serious and responsible, taking after Silas in temperament. Clara was wild and fearless, constantly getting into trouble and charming her way out of it. "She's exactly like you were," Sarah told Evelyn. "I was never that bad." Sarah just laughed. The years continued to pass. Good years and hard years and years that were both at once. They paid off Porter's loan when Ethan was 10, had a small celebration that consisted of burning the mortgage papers in the fireplace. "We did it," Evelyn said, watching the paper curl and blacken. "We own this place, really own it. Took 12 years. Best 12 years of my life." Silas pulled her close. They were both older now. He had gray in his beard. She had lines around her eyes. But they were still them, still fighting, still loving, still building. The ranch became known throughout Colorado Territory. People traveled from far away to buy cattle from the Boones, to learn from them, to hear their story. Silas still hated the attention, but he tolerated it because it was good for business. When Ethan turned 16, he started taking over more of the ranch operations. He was smart and capable, with his father's work ethic and his mother's head for numbers. "You're better at this than I was at your age," Silas told him. "That's because you taught me. Your mother taught you. I just showed you how to fix fences." Clara, at 12, had no interest in ranching. She wanted to be a teacher, wanted to open a school for the children of ranch families who lived too far from town to attend regular school. "It's a good dream," Evelyn encouraged. "Important work." "Papa thinks I should stay on the ranch." "Papa thinks lots of things. Doesn't mean you have to listen to all of them." Evelyn smiled. "Follow your dreams, sweetheart. The ranch will be fine without you." Over the years, they'd helped other families get started, loaned money to people trying to buy land, gave advice to newcomers, hired on young men who needed work, and taught them the trade. "We're building something bigger than just a ranch," Silas said one evening. "What's that?" "Community, real community, the kind where people help each other." He looked thoughtful. "Never had that before. Not until here. Not until you. You helped build it too." "No, you built it by choosing to trust people. I just learned from watching you." That wasn't entirely true, but Evelyn didn't argue. Let him have his version of events. When Ethan was 18, he fell in love with a girl from town, Mary Henderson, old Henderson's granddaughter. She was sweet and smart and completely smitten with the serious young rancher. "You approve?" Ethan asked Evelyn nervously. "Does it matter if I approve?" "Yes." "Then yes, I approve. She's lovely, treats you well, makes you happy." Evelyn touched his face. "That's all that matters." They married the following spring, had a big wedding that the whole town attended. Silas gave them the south section of the ranch as a wedding present, 300 acres to build their own homestead. "That's too much," Ethan protested. "It's exactly right," Silas said. "You've earned it. Now build something with it." Watching her son get married made Evelyn feel old. Where had the time gone? One minute she was holding a screaming newborn, the next she was watching that baby promise to love someone forever. "We're getting old," she told Silas that night. "Speak for yourself. I'm in my prime." "You're 48. "Like I said, prime." He pulled her close. "Besides, old age beats the alternative." That was true enough. Clara left for Denver when she was 18 to attend teacher's college. Evelyn cried for a week after she left. "She'll be back," Silas assured her. "I know, but the house feels empty." "We'll adjust." They did, though it took time. The house was quieter without the children, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. "Is this what it was like before?" Evelyn asked one evening, "when you lived alone in the mountains?" "No, that was silence. This is peace. Big difference." She understood what he meant. Silence was the absence of sound. Peace was the absence of fear. They were in their 50s now, old by frontier standards, though both were still healthy and working. Silas's hair had gone fully gray. Evelyn's had silver streaks through the dark. They moved slower than they used to, but still moved. Ethan and Mary gave them their first grandchild when Evelyn was 52. A boy they named Thomas, after Evelyn's first husband. "You don't mind?" Evelyn asked Silas. "Why would I mind? Thomas was important to you. Makes sense to honor him." She loved him for that, for never being threatened by her past, for understanding that she could honor her first husband while loving her second. Little Thomas was followed by 2 more grandchildren over the next few years. Clara came back from Denver with a teaching certificate and opened her school, teaching ranch children 3 days a week in a building Silas helped construct. The ranch thrived under Ethan's management. He had new ideas about breeding and grazing that Silas hadn't considered, made the operation even more successful. "We should retire," Evelyn said one evening. She was 55 now and tired more easily. "Let Ethan run things. We've earned some rest." "What would we do with rest?" "I don't know. Sit on the porch, watch sunsets, enjoy our grandchildren." "Sounds boring." "Sounds perfect." They compromised, stepped back from daily operations but stayed involved in decisions, spent more time with grandchildren, took actual days off occasionally. It was strange at first. After decades of constant work, rest felt uncomfortable, but they learned to enjoy it. One afternoon, they were sitting on the porch, the same porch where they'd sat so many times over the years, when a young couple rode up. They looked nervous and hopeful and desperate. "Can we help you?" Silas called. "We heard you sometimes help people who are trying to start ranches," the young man said. "We just bought land south of here, don't have much money, but we're willing to work hard." Silas looked at Evelyn. She smiled. "Come inside," Silas said. "Let's talk." They spent the afternoon advising the young couple, offering to loan them seed money, connecting them with people who could help, doing for others what had been done for them so many years ago. After the couple left, full of gratitude and hope, Evelyn turned to Silas. "We've come full circle." "How's that?" "We started with nothing but determination and people willing to help. Now we're the ones helping others start with nothing." "Seems right, doesn't it?" It did. It really did. The years continued their steady march. Evelyn turned 60, then 65. Silas hit 70 and complained about his knees more than he used to, but still worked when he felt like it. They had 5 grandchildren now, would probably have more. The ranch had expanded to cover over 2,000 acres, with Ethan managing the main operation and several smaller family homesteads on the property. The Boone name meant something in Colorado now, not because of money or power, but because of integrity, because they'd fought when it would have been easier to give up, because they'd helped others when they could have focused only on themselves. One evening in late summer, when Evelyn was 67 and Silas was 73, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, the same mountains where Silas had lived alone all those years ago. "Do you remember the letter?" Evelyn asked suddenly. "Which letter?" "The one you sent me. The honest one." "How could I forget? Changed my whole life." "Mine too." She reached over and took his hand. His palm was still rough and callous despite years of easier work. "Out of 40 men, you were the only one who told the truth. Didn't know any other way. That's what made it special." She looked at him, really looked at him, the gray hair, the weathered face, the scars that had faded but never disappeared. "I chose right." "Took you long enough to admit it," she laughed. "I admitted it years ago." "Still nice to hear." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun slipped below the mountains. Somewhere inside the house, they could hear voices. Ethan and Mary had brought the grandchildren over for dinner. Soon someone would call them inside. But for now, it was just the two of them and the land they'd fought so hard to keep. "When I die," Silas said quietly, "I want to be buried here, on this property, looking at those mountains." "Don't talk about dying. You're going to outlive us all." "I'm serious. I spent most of my life alone in those mountains. Figured I'd die alone up there somewhere. Nobody would find me for months, if ever." He squeezed her hand. "But you changed that. Gave me a home, a family, a reason to live instead of just survive." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. "You gave me the same thing. After Thomas died, I was just going through motions, trying to save something that didn't matter without someone to share it with." "It mattered. The land mattered, but it was just land until you made it a home." "We made it a home. Together." That was true. Everything they'd built together. The good and the bad, the fights and the victories, the love and the loss, all of it together. "Promise me something," Evelyn said. "Anything." "When I die, and don't argue, we're both old, I want to be buried next to you, looking at those mountains." "That's not much of a promise. Where else would I put you?" "I'm serious. I want us together, here, forever." "You've got it." He pulled her close. "You and me, and this land. Can't think of better company for eternity." They sat there until full dark, until Ethan called them in for dinner. The grandchildren attacked them with hugs and questions and demands for stories. And Silas told them about the mountains, about his cabin, about the day he wrote a letter to a widow he'd never met. And Evelyn told them about receiving 40 letters, about choosing the honest one, about riding into the mountains alone to meet a stranger. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, like it was the greatest adventure story ever told. Because it was. Not because it was dramatic or romantic or perfect, but because it was real. Because 2 broken people had found each other and built something that lasted. Years later, when Silas was 78 and his body finally gave out after a good life well lived, Evelyn held his hand as he took his last breath. "Thank you," he whispered. The same words he'd said the night Ethan was born. "Thank you for giving me a home." "Thank you for being one," she whispered back. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains he'd loved. Half the territory showed up for the funeral. People whose lives he'd touched, families he'd helped, children he'd taught to ride and rope and work. Evelyn stood at the grave with her children and grandchildren around her, and she didn't cry. Not because she wasn't sad, but because she wasn't sorry. They'd had 43 years together, good years, full years, years that meant something. She lived another 5 years after that. Watched more grandchildren arrive. Saw Clara's school expand to 3 buildings. Watched Ethan turn the ranch into one of the most successful operations in Colorado. And every evening, she sat on the porch and looked at the mountains and talked to Silas like he was still there. Because in a way, he was. In the land they'd built, in the children they'd raised, in the community they'd created. When she finally passed away at 73, holding a letter in her hands, the same letter Silas had written all those years ago, they buried her next to him on the hill. The grandchildren grew up hearing stories about the widow and the mountain man, about how they'd fought Mercer, how they'd built a ranch from nothing, how they'd loved each other through everything. And the stories spread beyond the family, became part of Colorado history. Not because Silas and Evelyn were special or perfect, but because they were honest. Because when 40 men offered pretty lies, one man had the courage to offer truth. And that truth had built something that lasted long after both of them were gone. The ranch stayed in the family for generations. The community they'd helped create continued to thrive. And every new couple who struggled to build something from nothing heard the story and took hope from it. Because if a desperate widow and a broken mountain man could create a legacy out of honesty and hard work, then maybe anyone could. That was the real lesson. Not that love conquers all or that good always wins, but that choosing truth over comfort, fighting when it's easier to quit, and building something together is always better than surviving alone. Silas had learned that lesson the hard way, spending 10 years in the mountains thinking isolation was safety. Evelyn had learned it when Thomas died and left her trying to save something by herself. But together, they'd learned something better. That strength isn't about being invulnerable. It's about being honest enough to admit you need help, brave enough to trust people who haven't earned it yet, stubborn enough to fight for what matters. And what mattered wasn't the land or the money or the success. It was the people, the family, the community, the connection. That was what Silas had found when he answered that advertisement. Not a business arrangement, not just a wife, but a home, a place where he belonged, where he was known and loved despite his scars. And that was what Evelyn had found when she chose the honest letter over the pretty ones. Not a savior, not a hero, but a partner. Someone who would fight beside her, fail beside her, build beside her. Together, they'd proven that the best foundations aren't built on charm or promises or grand gestures. They're built on truth, on showing up every day, on choosing each other again and again. And that was a legacy worth passing down.